The janitor arrived at the mansion before the sun had fully risen, his uniform slightly worn but neat. He had been working there for many years, yet every morning felt the same mix of quiet anticipation and humble duty. The mansion was enormous, almost like a small city, with tall gates, long driveways, and gardens that stretched beyond what the eye could see. Despite its beauty and grandeur, the place always felt distant and cold to him. He had cleaned these floors countless times, polished the windows until they reflected the morning sun perfectly. And yet, it never truly felt like home. His home was small, a modest apartment with a creaky floorboard and a window that barely let in sunlight. But it was warm, simple, and full of memories. He moved silently through the hallways, his mop in hand, pushing it across the marble floors. He had learned to work without disturbing anyone, moving like a shadow in the vast halls. The staff knew him as dependable, always ready with a quiet smile or a helping hand. The children of the mansion hardly noticed him, too busy with their toys, tutors, and lessons. But he noticed them, especially the youngest, little girl who often sat alone. Looking out the window as if she were searching for something just beyond her reach, the girl was special. She was intelligent, curious, and full of life, but she carried a quiet sadness that no one seemed to understand. She was deaf, and while her family loved her, their love often came wrapped in impatience or misunderstanding. Tutors tried to teach her, staff tried to care for her, and her parents provided every material comfort imaginable. But none of it seemed to reach her heart. She felt lonely, trapped in a world where everyone spoke, and she could only watch and try to respond the best she could. The janitor had watched her from afar for months, sometimes catching her small gestures. Her eyes lighting up with curiosity when she saw something she liked, her little frowns when she didn't understand. He didn't know why. But something about her quiet strength moved him deeply. It was in those small moments that he felt a responsibility. Not as a janitor, not as a staff member, but as a human being. He had no special training, no wealth, no title, but he had heart and patience, things that mattered more than gold or degrees. He began to notice small patterns in her life. She loved to watch the birds in the garden, tilting her head to follow their movements. She loved music, though she could not hear it. She would tap her fingers and sway slightly to rhythms she could feel through vibrations. She loved colors and would draw with crayons for hours, seeing patterns and shapes that seemed to tell stories he could only imagine. And she loved to dance, though she struggled because she could not hear the music clearly. One morning, as he was polishing the hallway floors, he saw her standing in the corner of the large living room. Her tiny hands clutched together, her eyes sad. She was trying to dance to a song playing faintly from the speakers, but she faltered, tripping over her own feet. He paused, watching her struggle, feeling a tug in his heart. He wanted to say something to help, but he did not know how. He was just the janitor, after all, not a teacher, not a tutor, but he could not turn away. He remembered the small smiles she gave when she tried to move to the music, the determination in her tiny body, and he knew he could not let her sadness go unnoticed that day. He lingered a little longer in the room after cleaning. He watched how she moved her hands, how she tried to follow the beat she could not hear. Slowly, he began to tap the floor gently, trying to create vibrations that she might feel. At first, she looked confused, then curious. Her small feet shifted, her hands reached out slightly, and a faint smile appeared on her face. It was a tiny moment, but it was a start. He did not speak, did not demand anything, simply moved with care and patience, letting her sense what she could. The connection was fragile, delicate, but real. Over the next few days, he began to study her more closely. He watched the way she responded to vibrations, the way her hands moved when she felt something, the way her eyes lit up with excitement at even the smallest discoveries. He thought about music constantly, about how it could be made accessible to her. He thought about the joy he had felt in small things in his own life, the warmth of sunlight on his face, the comfort of a shared smile. And he realized that joy did not need to be loud or complicated. It only needed someone who cared enough to try. The janitor started to gather small items quietly. Some were simple, ordinary things. Small speakers left unused, cushions that could transmit vibrations. materials he could use to build something that might help her feel music. He spent evenings after his shift thinking and experimenting, making small adjustments, testing ideas silently. He did not tell anyone what he was doing. It was not about recognition or reward. It was about seeing her smile, about giving her a chance to experience something that should have been simple but had been denied to her. The girl, meanwhile, continued her quiet days, unaware of the care that was slowly being built around her. She still struggled with her lessons, still felt the pangs of loneliness. But there were moments when she felt a tiny spark of something new. Sometimes she would look at the janitor with curious eyes, as if sensing a gentle presence behind her. Sometimes she would try to mimic his movements, tapping her feet, patting the floor, exploring the little vibrations she could feel. And in those moments, something magical began to take shape. The mansion, grand and imposing, continued its routine. The wealthy family went about their business, busy with work, meetings, and social events. The tutors worked hard to teach her language. The staff attended to daily chores. And the little girl navigated her world as best she could. But something was shifting quietly, subtly, in the corners of the grand halls. The janitor's heart, full of care and patience, was planting seeds of hope and joy that would grow in ways no one could yet imagine. And so, each day he moved through the mansion, cleaning, polishing, and observing. Each day he noticed the small details, the tiny struggles, the fleeting joys. He listened with his heart rather than his ears, understood without words, and dreamed of a day when the little girl might laugh and dance freely, feeling music in a way she had never known. He did not know how it would happen, or if it could even happen, but he believed it could. That belief, simple and steadfast, became the quiet purpose of his days. He understood that he was small in the grand scheme of the mansion, just a janitor among many, unnoticed and unremarkable. Yet he felt something stronger than titles or wealth, the ability to care deeply, to act patiently, and to hope fiercely. And with each sweep of the mop, each polished floor, and each quiet glance toward the little girl, he carried that hope forward, building a bridge between her lonely world and the joy he believed she deserved. Little did he know that this small act of noticing, this simple willingness to care, would soon set in motion events that would not only change her life, but would touch the hearts of everyone around them. It would show that kindness, patience, and courage could break through walls far taller than the mansion itself. And it would prove that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from wealth or power, but from the quiet actions of a humble heart, willing to see the unseen and care for the overlooked. The little girl often spent hours alone in the mansion's large garden, watching the world around her without being able to join it fully. She loved the flowers, their bright colors and delicate petals, but no one could explain their names to her in a way she could fully understand. Birds flew above her, chirping their songs, but all she could feel was a faint vibration when they landed near her feet. She longed to laugh and speak and dance like the other children she sometimes saw in videos, yet her world remained quiet and still. It was not because her family did not love her. It was because they did not understand the depth of her isolation. They had everything they could provide for her materially: toys, lessons, tutors, and gadgets. But the one thing she needed most, someone who would truly see her, was missing. The janitor watched her from a distance, often catching glimpses through large windows as he moved through the halls. He noticed the way she tilted her head when she was curious, how her fingers reached out to touch textures and surfaces, and how she reacted to vibrations in ways others did not understand. He remembered his own childhood, times when he felt unseen or unheard, and he felt a quiet connection to her. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between her silent world and the sounds, rhythms, and joy that seemed just out of reach. At breakfast, the girl often sat at the table with her parents and older siblings. The conversation flowed around her, words she could not hear, jokes she could not understand, stories she could not follow. Her parents tried to communicate with her using gestures and sign language, but it felt forced and incomplete. Tutors came and went, teaching her to leap read or use basic signs, but she still felt disconnected. Sometimes she would smile politely, nodding at the right moments, but inside. She felt a wave of loneliness that she could not escape. It was in these moments that the janitor's quiet presence mattered most. He did not speak. He did not try to teach. He only observed, noticed, and cared. One afternoon, the janitor saw her sitting on the steps of the garden, a small notebook in her lap. She had drawn pictures of flowers, birds, and shapes that told a story she could not yet express with words. Her small hands moved carefully, tracing lines and curves with crayons, yet her brow was furrowed. She had tried to follow a rhythm she felt in her body, but had stumbled and grown frustrated. Her tiny lips quivered, and she leaned back, staring at the sky with a mixture of sadness and longing. The janitor quietly approached, keeping his distance, but offering a supportive presence. She glanced up, saw him there, and for a moment, she did not feel entirely alone. He sat a few steps away, leaning against a railing, watching her movements carefully. He noticed the way she tapped her fingers on the notebook, attempting to feel a beat in the silence. How her toes shifted to find a rhythm she could sense through vibrations. Slowly, he began to tap his own fingers on the stone step, creating a subtle vibration that the girl could feel. Her eyes widened, and she paused, tilting her head as if trying to understand. The janitor did not speak, he did not rush, he simply created a rhythm that matched hers. Slowly, carefully, she began to move in response, her small hands and feet following the vibrations he provided. For the first time in a long while, a smile broke across her face, shy at first, then broader, as if she had discovered a secret only she and the janitor shared. This small breakthrough became the start of something new. Each day, the janitor looked for opportunities to create subtle vibrations she could feel. Sometimes it was tapping a floorboard in a quiet hallway. Other times it was gently patting a cushion where she sat. He experimented, watching her reactions, adjusting his methods, and learning what brought her joy. The girl began to anticipate these moments, tilting her head in curiosity, her tiny feet tapping along with rhythms she could sense but not hear. She did not yet understand how he did it, but she felt the connection and responded with excitement. Meanwhile, her isolation at school and in social settings remained. Other children played and laughed, their voices filling the air, while she stood aside, unsure how to join. She longed to participate, to run, to dance, and to sing, but the world felt like a locked door. The janitor's subtle interventions in the mansion's quiet corners became her sanctuary, a place where she could experiment, learn, and feel joy in her own way. She began to express herself more confidently, using gestures, movement, and even her drawings to communicate the emotions she could not put into words. The janitor's careful attention did not go unnoticed by a few observant staff members. Some wondered why he lingered near the girl so often, why he seemed so invested in her little world. They questioned whether it was appropriate for a janitor to be so involved. They could not deny the joy that shone on her face when he was near. She laughed more often, her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her movements grew more fluid and confident. Slowly, even her parents began to notice the change, though they did not yet understand its source. One rainy afternoon, the girl sat by the window, watching droplets race down the glass. Her little fingers traced shapes in the condensation, attempting to create patterns that reflected the rhythm she felt inside her. The janitor approached quietly, placing a hand gently on the windowsill to create a subtle vibration she could sense. Her eyes lit up and she began tapping along, creating a small dance with her fingers and feet. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and for a moment, the mansion's walls seemed to dissolve. She was not alone. Someone saw her, someone understood, and that understanding became a bridge between her silent world and the joy she longed to feel. This continued day by day, moment by moment. The janitor experimented with different ways to bring vibrations to her, creating new methods and tools from ordinary materials he found around the mansion. A cushion on the chair, a small speaker left unused, a wooden floorboard, all became instruments of connection. He tested, adjusted, and observed, always patient, always gentle. The girl responded, slowly building confidence and joy, discovering that she could interact with the world in ways she had never known. At night, the janitor often stayed late, cleaning quietly after everyone had gone to bed. Thinking about new ways to help her, he imagined her dancing freely, laughing and expressing herself without fear. He remembered his own childhood, times when someone had noticed him, believed in him, offered kindness without expectation. He wanted to offer the same gift to her, not for reward, but because it mattered, because it could change her life. The mansion, with all its wealth and grandeur, remained unchanged on the surface. Wealthy parties, business meetings, and daily routines continued without interruption. Yet in its quiet corners a transformation was beginning. A small girl, once isolated and lonely, began to discover joy and self-expression through the simple, caring acts of a humble janitor. He was not a teacher, not a tutor, not a parent. He was a human being who chose to see and respond to her silent struggles. And that choice, simple as it seemed, was creating ripples that would soon reach far beyond the mansion's walls. She began to move more confidently each day, practicing her gestures, her tapping, and her small dances. She began to communicate her feelings more openly, even to her parents. Though they still struggled to understand the depth of her transformation, the janitor continued to support her quietly, offering subtle guidance, testing new rhythms, and creating a safe space for her to explore. He never demanded anything in return, never sought recognition, simply acted with patience, empathy, and quiet courage. Over time, the mansion's staff and family began to notice small but meaningful changes. The little girl laughed more often, moved with confidence, and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Her parents, though still learning to understand her world, began to see glimpses of her joy and potential. The janitor, unnoticed by most, had begun to create a bridge between her silent world and the vibrancy of life she deserved to experience. And in that bridge, a story of hope, patience, and human connection was quietly unfolding one day. One gesture, one vibration at a time. The janitor could not stop thinking about the little girl and the joy that he had begun to bring to her days. Every morning as he arrived at the mansion, he felt a quiet determination growing inside him. He wanted to do more than just create small vibrations or tap floors. He wanted to find a way to let her truly experience the music she loved, to feel the rhythms and melodies that everyone else could hear, but which had always been beyond her reach. He spent hours after his shifts, walking through the mansion's storage rooms and garages, searching for anything that might help him. Old speakers, cushions, metal plates, and even discarded electronics became part of his experiments. He tried different methods, carefully noting how the girl reacted to vibrations through the floor. The furniture, and even handheld devices he fashioned from spare parts. Every time she smiled or moved her hands and feet in rhythm, his heart swelled. He realized that music was more than sound. It was vibration, energy, and emotion. If he could make her feel the vibration, she could experience the music in her own way. He started drawing diagrams and making small prototypes. One evening, he stayed late in the empty mansion, testing a cushion placed on a wooden chair. He played a small recording and held the cushion in place while tapping to the rhythm. He imagined the girl sitting there, smiling and tapping along with him. It was not perfect, but it was a start. He experimented with different surfaces, different volumes, different ways to transmit the vibrations through touch. Each evening, he refined his approach, learning from small successes and failures. At the same time, he thought about communication. The girl understood basic sign language, but he realized she needed more than signs to connect with the music she loved. He began practicing hand signals and gestures to accompany the rhythms, so she could follow along without frustration. He created small visual cues, using simple shapes and colors to represent beats and changes in the melody. He imagined her eyes lighting up as she learned to understand the music in a new way, and the thought kept him working late into the night. The janitor knew he had to be patient. He could not rush the girl or force her to understand. He remembered his own childhood, when small gestures of kindness had meant more than grand actions. He wanted to create the same kind of connection, something that would not overwhelm her, but guide her gently into a world she had never experienced. He thought carefully about every detail, every movement, and every vibration. testing his ideas in quiet corners where no one would notice. One morning, he brought one of his small devices into the garden where the girl liked to sit. She was drawing in her notebook, her tiny hands moving carefully across the page. He placed the device under the chair she often used and gestured for her to sit. At first, she hesitated, unsure of what was happening. But as he tapped and adjusted the vibration, her eyes widened. She moved her hand slightly, feeling the rhythm, and a small smile appeared on her face. She tried tapping her fingers along, hesitant but curious. The janitor nodded gently, encouraging her without words. Slowly, her movements became more confident, more fluid, as she began to feel the beat she had never experienced before. The breakthrough gave him courage. He continued developing new methods, adjusting the devices, and experimenting with different sounds and vibrations. He created simple ways to convey the music through the floor, chairs, and even walls. Each success brought a small spark of joy to the girl's eyes, and each spark fueled his determination. He realized that his work was not just about music. It was about giving her a sense of connection, confidence, and self-expression. He wanted her to feel that she could engage with the world fully, even in ways others could not imagine. Meanwhile, the girl's curiosity grew. She began to anticipate the janitor's presence and the small experiments he introduced. She tapped her feet and hands along with the vibrations, her eyes bright with excitement. She drew shapes and colors that reflected the rhythms she felt, creating her own interpretations of music. The janitor watched with pride, noting every reaction, every smile, and every gesture. It was slow progress, but it was real. It mattered more than anything he had ever done. The mansion's staff and family began to notice subtle changes. The girl moved with more confidence, smiled more often, and seemed less isolated. The janitor, however, remained unnoticed, quietly working behind the scenes. He did not seek recognition or reward. He only wanted to help her experience the world she had been missing. He remembered that small acts of care often made the largest impact, and he believed that consistency and patience would lead to meaningful results. One afternoon, the janitor decided to combine multiple methods. He placed a cushion on a chair, adjusted a small speaker under the floor, and used hand gestures to guide her through a simple rhythm. The girl followed along hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Her hands tapped the cushion, her feet moved in rhythm with the floor vibrations, and her eyes sparkled with understanding. She laughed quietly, a soundless laugh that radiated joy. The janitor smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the bridge he was building between her silent world and the music she loved was becoming stronger each day. The next few weeks were filled with small experiments, each designed to help her experience more complex rhythms. The janitor adjusted his methods based on her reactions, always careful not to overwhelm her. He introduced simple melodies, encouraging her to feel the difference between fast and slow beats. He used colors and shapes to indicate changes in rhythm and volume. Slowly, she began to recognize patterns, responding with movement, gestures, and expressions of delight. Each session was a step forward, small victory in a journey that had once seemed impossible. He also began to notice the girl's creativity blossoming. She started to invent her own rhythms, tapping her hands and feet in ways that expressed her feelings. She combined gestures and movement with drawings, creating a language of her own. The janitor encouraged her gently, celebrating each success, no matter how small. He realized that this process was not just about music. It was about helping her discover her own voice and identity. It's a sense of empowerment that had been missing from her life. At the same time, he remained aware of the family's reactions. The parents noticed changes in their daughter, but did not yet understand the source. They saw her smiling more, engaging with her environment, and moving with confidence. They were pleased but puzzled, and sometimes skeptical of the janitor's involvement. He remained calm and patient, knowing that trust would come with time. His focus was not on approval, but on creating meaningful experiences for the girl. One evening, the janitor stayed late, testing a new method using multiple devices to create a layered rhythm. He imagined her sitting in the garden, her hands and feet moving in harmony with the vibrations. He adjusted the intensity, timing, and placement, carefully observing how each change affected the experience. When he finally felt satisfied, he left everything in place for the next day. He knew she would discover it on her own, at her own pace, and that the sense of discovery would make the experience even more powerful. The next morning, the girl approached the devices with curiosity. She touched the cushion, felt the floor vibrations, and began tapping along. The layered rhythm was more complex than anything she had experienced before, yet she adapted quickly, guided by her instincts and the subtle cues the janitor had created. Her movements became a dance, her hands and feet expressing joy, excitement, and understanding. The janitor watched quietly from a distance, tears threatening to fall as he witnessed the culmination of his efforts. It was a moment of pure connection, a triumph of patience, creativity, and care. This success marked a turning point. The janitor realized that he had created not just a method for feeling music, but a new world for the girl, a space where she could express herself freely, confidently, and joyfully. He continued to refine his techniques, always thinking of new ways to challenge her gently and inspire her creativity. Each day brought new discoveries, new movements, and new expressions of joy. Reinforcing the bond that had quietly formed between them, he understood that his work was about more than music. It was about giving her the tools to engage with life, to communicate, to express, and to feel joy. He saw the transformation in her eyes, the confidence in her gestures, and the delight in her movements. She was no longer the lonely, isolated child who had once sat quietly by the window. She was discovering her own rhythm, her own voice, and her own power to connect with the world around her. And the janitor, humble and unnoticed by most, had become the architect of this transformation, using patience, creativity, and unwavering care to open a door that had long been closed. The morning air in the mansion was quiet, almost still, as the janitor moved through the long hallways with his usual careful steps. Today, however, something felt different. He carried with him the latest setup he had created, combining vibrations from the floor, chairs, and small devices he had crafted. He had stayed up late perfecting it, adjusting rhythms and patterns to match a song that the little girl loved but had never truly felt before. He imagined her discovering it, her eyes lighting up with wonder and delight, and it made every moment of effort feel worth it. The girl was in the garden, sitting on her favorite chair with her notebook open. Her hands tapped idly against her knees, moving to a rhythm only she could sense. She looked up as the janitor approached, a mixture of curiosity and trust in her eyes. He set up the devices quietly, not wanting to startle her, and gestured for her to sit on the cushion he had prepared. At first, she hesitated, unsure what to expect. The janitor smiled softly, giving her a gentle nod, and she slowly positioned herself as he activated the vibrations. A soft, rhythmic pulse moved through the cushion and the floor beneath her. She placed her hands on the cushion, her small fingers trembling with anticipation. At first, she barely reacted, unsure how to interpret the sensation. Then, almost imperceptibly, her toes tapped against the floor, finding the rhythm. Her hands began to move in sync with the vibrations, and a smile spread across her face, growing wider with each beat. The janitor watched quietly, his heart pounding with excitement and relief. She was feeling the music, truly feeling it, in a way that no one else had been able to give her. Encouraged by her response, adjusted the rhythm slightly, introducing subtle variations and changes in tempo. She followed along instinctively, moving her hands and feet with growing confidence. Her movements became more fluid, more expressive, and her eyes sparkled with joy. She laughed silently, a soundless laugh that seemed to fill the garden with light. The janitor felt tears prickling in his eyes. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The breakthrough that made every late night and every small experiment worthwhile. The girl began to explore the full range of vibrations, tapping her fingers on the cushion, pressing her feet against the floor, and leaning slightly to feel the pulse of the music. She experimented with speed and intensity, creating her own variations and discovering new ways to interpret the rhythm. The janitor encouraged her with gentle nods and soft gestures, never rushing, never correcting, simply supporting her exploration. He realized that this was more than just teaching her to feel music. It was giving her the freedom to express herself, to create, to play, to connect with something beautiful in the world. Time seemed to stretch and blur as they continued. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and the little girl's confidence grew with each beat. She danced with her hands and feet, moving in ways that expressed joy, curiosity, and wonder. She laughed silently, spun in place, and even attempted small jumps, feeling the rhythm guide her movements. The janitor watched with pride and awe. He had never seen her so alive, so completely in the moment. And he understood that this connection was changing her from the inside out. The breakthrough did not go unnoticed for long. A few staff members who passed by the garden stopped, watching in amazement as the girl moved with confidence and joy. Some whispered to each other, unsure what they were witnessing. The parents arrived shortly after, drawn by the sounds of movement and the sight of their daughter laughing and dancing. They froze for a moment, taking in the scene. Their daughter, who had struggled with isolation and silence, was now fully engaged with the music, her face radiant with happiness. The janitor remained by her side, quietly guiding her, his presence calm and supportive, the parents' eyes filled with tears as they realized what was happening. They approached cautiously, unsure how to react. The janitor continued to support the girl, allowing her to lead the moment. She noticed her parents but did not stop. She moved confidently, expressing herself through rhythm and vibration. The parents' hearts swelled with pride and gratitude. They understood, finally, that someone had cared enough to find a way to connect with their daughter in a manner that truly reached her heart. Over the next few days, the sessions continued. The girl's skill and confidence grew rapidly. She learned to anticipate changes in rhythm, to express emotions through her movements, and even to create simple sequences of her own. She experimented with different beats, varying her pressure on the floor and the cushion, and using her hands to add complexity. The janitor encouraged creativity, praising her efforts silently through gestures and gentle smiles. He realized that what he had given her was more than music. It was a language of expression, a bridge between her silent world and the vibrant life she deserved. The mansion, once filled with quiet routines and distant interactions, began to feel warmer and more alive. The little girl laughed more often, moved with confidence, and engaged with her surroundings in ways that had seemed impossible before. The staff and family were astonished by her transformation, and the janitor, humble and unnoticed by most, became the architect of this change. He continued to support her quietly, focusing on her needs, her curiosity, and her joy. His patience and creativity had unlocked a world she had never known. One afternoon, the janitor introduced a new element, multiple vibrations layered together to create a more complex rhythm. The girl approached with curiosity, placing her hands and feet carefully as she explored the new sensations. She quickly adapted, her movements growing more intricate and expressive. She laughed silently, clapped her hands, and tapped her feet in harmony with the layered rhythm. The janitor watched, amazed by her adaptability and creativity. He realized that she was not just feeling the music. She was creating it, shaping it, and making it her own. The parents observed in awe. They had never imagined that their daughter could experience music in such a profound way. Tears filled their eyes as they saw the joy radiating from her, a joy that had been missing from her life for so long. They understood in that moment the power of care, patience, and understanding. They saw that the janitor, a humble man without wealth or title, had given their daughter something priceless, a connection to the world, a means to express herself, and the confidence to embrace life fully. Word of the girl's transformation spread quietly through the staff. Some were amazed, some were curious, but all recognized the janitor's dedication and creativity. He had worked tirelessly, without expectation of reward, to create a world where the girl could experience music and joy. His actions inspired respect and admiration, though he remained humble, focused only on the girl's happiness. He understood that true impact often comes not from recognition, but from the quiet, consistent effort to care for another person. As the weeks passed, the girl's abilities grew even more remarkable. She learned to anticipate changes in rhythm, combine different movements, and create her own sequences. She explored the full range of vibrations, experimenting with intensity, speed, and placement. Her laughter filled the mansion, a soundless but palpable expression of joy. The janitor continued to guide her, adjusting his methods, introducing new rhythms, and encouraging her creativity. Each day brought new discoveries, new movements, and new expressions of emotion. The breakthrough had transformed not only the girl, but also the mansion itself. Spaces that had once felt cold and distant now vibrated with energy and joy. The parents began to understand the depth of her experience, realizing that what she had gained was more than skill. It was a sense of connection, self-expression, and confidence. The janitor, quiet and humble, had created a space where she could thrive. A place where her silent world was met with understanding and care. The little girl's transformation reached its peak one morning as she danced freely across the garden, moving her hands, feet, and body in harmony with the vibrations around her. She laughed silently, spun, and clapped, creating a symphony of movement that radiated joy. The janitor watched from a short distance, his heart full of pride and emotion. He knew that this moment represented everything he had worked for: connection, expression, and the pure joy of being seen and understood. He realized that the impact of his actions extended far beyond music. He had given her the ability to feel life in a profound, meaningful way. The breakthrough was complete. The little girl had discovered her rhythm, her voice, and her joy. She moved with confidence, expressed herself freely, and connected with the world in ways that had once seemed impossible. The janitor, humble and dedicated, had made this possible through patience, creativity, and unwavering care. And in that quiet garden, amidst vibrations and silent laughter, a story of hope, transformation, and human connection unfolded, touching the hearts of everyone who witnessed it and leaving a lasting mark on the lives of both the girl and the Pearl mansion. The mansion was alive with a sense of warmth and joy that had never existed before. The little girl moved confidently through the halls, her tiny feet tapping rhythms she could feel, her hands and body expressing a language of music and emotion all her own. The janitor continued to work quietly, cleaning and maintaining the spaces, but his eyes often lingered on the girl with a mixture of pride and gentle affection. He did not need recognition or thanks. Seeing her laugh, dance, and feel joy was reward enough. Yet others were beginning to notice, and the impact of his quiet dedication was spreading far beyond what he could have imagined. The parents watched their daughter with awe. They had seen her transformation over the past weeks, watched her grow more confident and expressive, and felt the change in her spirit. They realized that the person who had helped her achieve this was not a tutor, not a teacher, but a janitor, someone who had no special title or wealth, yet possessed the patience, creativity, and heart to make a true difference. Their gratitude grew daily, and though they had never imagined they would be so moved by the actions of a humble staff member, they knew they owed him a debt far greater than money could repay. One afternoon, as the girl practiced a new rhythm, the parents approached the janitor quietly. The father's eyes were moist, and the mother's hand rested gently on his shoulder. They did not need to speak. Their expressions conveyed a depth of gratitude that words could never fully capture. The janitor nodded modestly, his heart swelling, but his demeanor calm. He had acted from care, not expectation, and that care had created something extraordinary. The parents finally understood that his actions had given their daughter more than music. He had given her a voice, confidence, and a sense of belonging. The girl, sensing the attention and gratitude, moved closer to the janitor, her small hands reaching out to touch his arm in a gesture of affection. He looked down at her and smiled warmly, patting her hand gently. She laughed silently, spinning once in place and clapping her hands in delight. The connection between them was clear, unspoken, yet profound. It was not just about music or vibrations. It was about understanding, empathy, and the transformative power of someone believing in her potential. Word of the janitor's extraordinary dedication began to spread throughout the mansion. Staff members who had once questioned his closeness to the girl now watched with respect and admiration. They saw the joy he had helped create and realized that his actions were not only appropriate but remarkable. Some whispered to one another, sharing stories of how the little girl had blossomed under his guidance. Others offered quiet praise, acknowledging the patience, creativity, and kindness that had made such a profound difference. The little girl's confidence continued to grow. She began to explore more complex rhythms, combining vibrations, hand gestures, and movement in ways that expressed her emotions fully. She created patterns of her own, experimenting with intensity, speed, and variation. The janitor guided her gently, encouraging her to take risks, explore new ideas, and express herself freely. Each day brought new discoveries, new moments of joy, and new expressions of creativity. The mansion, once filled with distant routines, now resonated with energy and life, a reflection of the girl's newfound spirit. The parents decided to recognize the janitor in a small, heartfelt way. They invited him to the family room, where the girl stood proudly, holding a handmade card she had created. The parents spoke softly, expressing their gratitude, their admiration, and their recognition of the extraordinary impact he had made. The janitor listened quietly, humbled by their words, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had not sought acknowledgement, yet the acknowledgement mattered, not as a reward, but as a testament to the difference one person's care could make. The girl presented the card to him, her small hands offering it with pride. The janitor took it gently, his eyes glistening as he read the words and admired the drawings. She clapped her hands quietly, spinning with joy, and he nodded in encouragement. In that moment, a bond was affirmed, a bond built on trust, care, and shared discovery. It was a moment of connection that transcended words, celebration of the power of empathy and patience. As the days passed, the little girl continued to thrive. She danced, tapped, and expressed herself with confidence, her silent laughter filling the mansion. She communicated more openly with her parents, using the skills she had developed to share her thoughts and emotions. Her creativity flourished, and she approached new challenges with curiosity and courage. The janitor remained a steady presence, guiding her gently, celebrating her successes, and offering support whenever it was needed. The mansion had become a place of joy, learning, and growth, a reflection of the transformative impact of his care. The janitor's dedication also inspired others. Staff members began to approach their roles with renewed attention to the needs and potential of those around them. They saw how a single person's consistent, thoughtful actions could create profound change. The parents, too, were inspired to engage more deeply with their daughter, learning from the janitor's patience and creativity. Together, they built an environment where the girl could continue to explore, express, and grow. One afternoon, the janitor observed the girl dancing across the garden, her hands and feet moving in perfect harmony with the vibrations she could feel. She laughed silently, spun, and clapped, creating rhythms that reflected her emotions and imagination. He smiled quietly, realizing that this was the culmination of months of effort, care, and patience. She had discovered her voice, her rhythm, and her joy. She had learned to engage with the world fully, expressing herself in ways that were uniquely her own. The parents watched from the veranda, their eyes filled with tears of pride and gratitude. They understood that the janitor's actions had done more than teach music. They had given their daughter the confidence to engage with life, the ability to communicate beyond words, and the freedom to express herself authentically. They saw that true impact does not always come from wealth, power, or title, but from care, patience, and empathy. The janitor had exemplified these qualities in the most extraordinary way. The little girl approached the janitor and hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his waist. He held her gently, feeling the warmth of her trust and affection. He knew that this moment represented the ultimate reward for his efforts. It was not recognition, money, or praise that mattered, but the tangible joy and confidence he had helped nurture in her life. The bond between them was unspoken but profound, a testament to the power of human connection and the lasting impact of kindness. In the weeks and months that followed, the girl's transformation continued to inspire everyone in the mansion. She explored new creative expressions, combined movement and rhythm in inventive ways, and communicated openly with her family. The janitor remained a steady, supportive presence, guiding her gently, celebrating her successes, and offering encouragement whenever it was needed. His actions had created a lasting legacy, demonstrating that even those in humble roles could create extraordinary change through empathy, patience, and care. The mansion itself had changed. Spaces that once felt distant and cold now resonated with energy, laughter, and creativity. Staff and family alike had learned the value of observation, patience, and thoughtful intervention. They recognized that true impact comes not from wealth or authority, but from the willingness to care deeply and act consistently. The janitor, once unnoticed, had become a quiet hero, shaping the life of the little girl in ways that would be remembered for years to come. The little girl often danced through the halls, tapping rhythms on the floor, clapping her hands, and expressing her joy through movement and vibration. She communicated more openly, explored her creativity freely, and engaged with the world in ways that had once seemed impossible. The janitor watched, quietly proud, knowing that his efforts had created a foundation for a lifetime of self-expression, confidence, and joy. He continued his work with humility, always focused on the girl's growth and happiness. One evening, as the sun set over the mansion, the girl and the janitor sat together in the garden. She drew pictures reflecting the rhythm she had felt, and he watched her, smiling quietly. They did not need words. Their connection was deep and unspoken. In that quiet moment, the janitor understood the full impact of his actions. He had transformed not only the girl's experience, but the environment around her. He had shown that kindness, patience, and empathy could break through barriers, create joy, and change lives in profound ways. The story of the janitor and the little girl became a quiet legend within the mansion. Staff shared the tale, parents spoke of it to friends, and the girl's progress continued to inspire. The janitor never sought fame or recognition. His reward was the knowledge that he had made a lasting difference. The little girl thrived, her life filled with music, joy, and self-expression. And in every tap of her hands, every rhythm she felt, and every movement she made, the quiet, humble care of a janitor remained at the heart of her transformation, proving that even the simplest acts of kindness can leave the deepest impact on a life.